Over to you, Darren, I guess.
Oh, so are we ready now? Okay.
Yes.
All right. So good morning and welcome to everybody who is viewing live and people who will view once this is recorded. My name is Darren Sharif. I'm the proud director of the Tech House. It is a facility and a program operated by the Urban League of Essex County. And the purpose of the Urban League is to provide a number of digital technology services, not only to just like narrow the digital divide, but to close it completely. And we do a number of wonderful things here, all the way from computer literacy to this incredible partnership with Audible. And we're thankful for that. Thank you for the website that you guys have built. Thank you for the Tech Talk learning series that you kicked off. And thank you for the first learning series, which we're going to launch today, which hopefully will cover not just topics today, but a number of other topics. And I want to welcome the viewers and just encourage them, if it's like one viewer live and you appreciate the value of what you're getting, please spread the word. We're going to do strategic outreaches to other nonprofit organizations and small businesses. But I think I will turn it over now to Beth. Oh, to Doug, a member of Audible's team. Thank you, Doug, who will proceed with today's presentation.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Darren. I just wanted to mention, as you just did, that this is our Tech House Community Learning Series. This is the first one. Uh, we're hoping to have several every 3 months or so. The purpose of this series is to give hands-on practical knowledge about specific technical topics that will be useful in a business environment. The next one coming up will be in February when Ken Walker will be talking about Tableau. And each of these sessions will be recorded and available on the Tech House for folks to view afterwards. Before we dive into this particular session, just wanted to thank you, Darren, for hosting this, as well as Ian for sponsoring it. And I'll turn it over to Autumn to introduce our first speaker and the topic.
Thanks, Doug. My name is Autumn Chapacante. I'm a software development manager here at Audible, and yeah, just very happy to be working with Tech House on this new series. Here with me is Beth Zellen, who is one of our lead technical program managers, which is a role that includes running a portfolio of projects that we have here at Audible. Specifically, she's responsible for our international expansion program. Her work also includes managing the other technical program managers who are working on those projects. And then, fun fact about Beth is that she actually has some ties here in Newark. Her parents, or her father grew up here, and then her parents met here when they and lived here when they first got married. And she grew up hearing a lot of fun stories about hanging out in the Ironbound district. So I will turn it over to Beth now. She's going to be covering the topic of Excel productivity, tips and tricks, and very much looking forward to and thankful that she's going to share that with us today. So all yours, Beth.
Great. I'm happy to be here. My screen is coming up there. Okay. So, everybody gave a great intro. I would like to say that this is probably, maybe not beginner Excel, but not like super advanced. It's attainable skills that you can use when you're just using simple spreadsheets for personal use or maybe for small business use. I end up actually using Excel quite a bit at Audible in my role, just because if I need to do some type of quick analysis on some data set, sometimes it's easier to just dump it to Excel, do some queries and pivot tables and stuff like that, rather than get an engineer to write some script for me or to use our data analysis team, who I think we have somebody coming for Tableau in a couple of weeks, who do much more advanced things, but this is much more of a quick, easy way to look at some things. So I threw this slide in here. A little story that my husband and I were getting our apartment remodeled for a while, and I had a spreadsheet of a bunch of things we needed to buy, some of the contractor quotes and different things they were offering to do. My husband asked me to send this sheet, and I'm like, great, yeah, great being engaged, because I usually do all that stuff. And then I find him with the sheet up and then like a calculator on the side, typing numbers in. I'm like, what are you doing? So I need to add how much this work is and this work is. I'm like, you do know that's what Excel is for. He said, what do you mean? And I even asked him about this last night because I told him I was going to embarrass him. And he mentioned that he thought Excel was basically the newer version of graph paper. So it was just to make things nice and aligned, but it didn't actually do, kind of math and things like that. So don't be my husband. This is the kind of look he gave me when I tried to explain that to him. So these are some of the things I'm going to go through. Like I said, it's not super advanced. It does assume a little bit of skills. So if there are things that I'm going too fast for, maybe type in the chat and Autumn can word. So I'll go over some functions, some ifs, count functions, VLOOKUP, which can be very useful when you're taking two data sets and trying to compare things or look one thing up in the other data set. And then I'll spend some time on pivot tables, pivot charts.
Just real quick one thing. If you do have questions for Beth at any point, I shared a link in the chat to Slido, just posted it again. You can go there and you can write your questions out. We'll have a Q&A session toward the end, so feel free to put those there, and then we'll address them later on. Back to you.
Yes. Okay. So like I said, the first thing I'm going to cover is some ifs. I have a very non-exciting PowerPoint. I'll probably mostly be next time. So let's see if I can change sharing. Okay. So as I mentioned, my husband was manually calculating things. The very basic sum function that many of you might know, which is when you put equal, will start any function, and you can start typing sum. So if you hit tab once you're there, it will give you sort of a tooltip that lets you know that you can put individual cells for a number central type. And then there's also the ability to basically drag a range, right? And that will give you the total of everything that's in that group. Then you might say like, oh, I really only want to know things that Snoopy or Snoopy's owner bought at this store, right? So you could, this is what many people do. They just go, oh, I'm going to select this cell, and then I'm going to hit comma, and then I'm going to select this cell, and they go through the sheet like this. And that is just not efficient, especially when you have larger data sheets, right? So the first function that I'm going to call out is called SUMIF. So again, start typing it, it comes up, I can hit tab. And it lets you pick a range and a criteria. So my criteria is going to be Snoopy. And I'm going to say for this data table, I'm going to look for Snoopy in this row, or this column. And it only works with, it will find the same, basically the same row. So it will look for Snoopy, find the same row, and then give me the sum of the values that match that criteria. And I did. Sorry, I did not hit Snoopy first.
I was wondering.
Yeah. I'm not great at talking and walking. One other fun fact is that I used to be a Windows user and I switched to Mac a couple months back, and things like Excel are just not exactly the same, meaning like hotkeys and things like that. So I'm much more used to hotkeys to do some things manually. don't know. We're gonna just. There we go.
Yeah.
I think there's some
I think you were putting
formatting
these
going in there. Yeah.
it's the first time.
Again, I can do the same thing for Lassie, but we'll move on since I don't put there. Similarly, you can use some ifs to, it's just plural, it lets you do several parameters. So this is how I did that last example. But instead, if I want to look at both Snoopy and food purchases, then I would use some ifs. At the end. And the order of operations is a little bit different, but you do the sum range first. So this is the sum. And then you go by criteria range. So now we go, the first criteria I want to look at is the dog name, and then Snoopy, and then you can do as many criteria as you want. I just have one additional in here, which is for the category. And then I'm talking about food, which I put at the top here. So this is just Snoopy's food purchases. One thing to know about Excel, if you want to copy, you can copy this down, right? But if you're using what they call relative cell ranges, so this E7 to E18, it's changing that number. So as you go down one, E4 became E5, became E6. Change my screen share just so it's a little easier between. So this is what I was just talking about, where if you copy A1 over one cell, it becomes B1, down becomes A2, over and down comes B2. But you can add what are called absolute cell references, which is basically a dollar sign in front. So if you had A1 with a dollar sign in front of A, when you copied it, instead of becoming, if you copied it, it would, that's the wrong measure there, but A would hold and the other number would change. Similarly, if you had the dollar sign in front of the number wouldn't change, but the letter. And you could also lock both of them. And I mention that because when I copy these over and I copy this way, I want to lock some of those cells so that Snoopy, Lassie, Toto, Scooby-Doo change and food, accessory, boarding change, but my ranges over here don't change. So, yeah. And the fastest way to toggle between those different absolute and locked is function keys. So you can use function F4. So watch the E4 up here. Function F4. So if I toggle once, it's putting the dollar instead of both in front of both of them. I do it one more time, it's just in front of the row. If I do it one more time, it will be just in front of the column, and the last time it goes back to none of them. So for these ranges, and you can look at the color coding here. So for the green range, I want that to lock, so I'm going to toggle these all to have both pieces locked. And then similarly for the red one, and then also for the green one. And then I mentioned for Snoopy, I want it to still change as I go copy down, but not change when I copy across. So I want to lock the column, which is the G part. So again, I'm going to just toggle, and this time I'm going to toggle until I get to the $sign just being in front of the G. And then lastly, for where it's food is right now highlighted, I'm going to do the same, but in this time, I'm going to change it just for the row, which is the 3. That should all hold. And now if I copy this and paste, Control C, Control V. If I go look at this bottom one, and if you just click into the cell, you'll see it's still holding food. It did move for Scooby, but it didn't move for these other columns. And then I can now copy also across. So I can go this way, copy. And again, it's good to just check your last one if you're doing a big copy like that and make sure all the things that you thought were being referenced are being referenced. So I know that was a lot of information, but it's just one of those things you need to keep in mind when you're doing copy paste and referencing cells and stuff like that. Next, so this was 2 criteria sums. If you really wanted to, you could use the sum ifs on a single criteria. It just depends on if you want to stick with just one parameter. Going into count ifs. So count ifs are basically the same thing, but instead of summing things, I'm counting. So I'm going to, in this sense, in this one, count. And I'm going to pick a range and a criteria. So I just want how many times is food in this. I'm not going to bother blocking my cells because I'm not copy pasting right now. And so there's 5 entries here. Again, just like sum if, I can have count ifs. And this is where you get multiple criteria. So now I'm going to say both category, food, and then I just wanted to show you I could also do dollar math, basically. So anything that's greater than 25. And that shows me that there's, out of those 5 that had food, 4 of them have dollar amounts more than 25. And if you put it in cells like this, if you later decide, oh, I actually care about $30, then you don't have to worry about rechanging your formula. You can just change it. Right, I'm gonna move on to.
Beth, there was one question that came into the Slido just asking if you could go over the Snoopy example again.
Yeah. Okay, we'll do this one. So this is the sum if example, so just one lookup. And I do equal and sum if. It pulls up my most recently one here, and it will also pull the other ones. If you hit tab, it will fill in the rest. You could also just type it out. But so now I've got sum if, and the 3 parameters I need to put in here are the range. So where am I going to look for what I'm looking for, which is Snoopy, what I'm going to look for, which is Snoopy, and then what I'm going to sum up. What range am I going to sum up? So I'm going to look for, I'm going to look in this data set, comma, and then I'm going to look for this value, Snoopy, and then I'm going to sum up this. And what that means is it's going to look for Snoopy, take this value, look for the next Snoopy, add that next value, add those in. And then similarly, I could change this value. I could change this to photo. And now it's just looking at my photo rows. And then the other functions, sum if, ifs, count if, and count ifs, all do that same kind of thing. You just really kind of need to look at what this is telling you need to put in. One thing to know is if you just hit on that, it will open up help. So it will also give you examples in here that you can then look for. I'm going to go to the VLOOKUP. So this will let you look at two different data sets and kind of look things up. It's in a very simple case, the sum and the counted were very similar, but this one will bring back a value from that other data set and let you put it in. So I know that doesn't make much sense unless I show an example. So right now I've got a bunch of orders, salespeople, and order amounts, and I want to look up in this data set the order amount. So just pull the exact value back. So for A102, I'm hoping we'll come back to 24.9. And I have a couple of lookup attacks, so I get progressively harder. So now I'm going to, similar to the last ones, where I'm going to look up a value. I'm going to pick my lookup value here based on this. And then I'm going to do a table array. So first I'm going to show you just the quick way to do a table array, and later I'll show you an actual table. An array just means, multiple columns, multiple rows. So I'm saying in this whole data set, I'm going to look up A102. It always looks up, the VLOOKUP always looks up in the first column. So whatever you're looking at always needs to be in this first column. But then you can pull back anything else that you want from that. So what goes in this third parameter is the index of what I want back. So you're counting, this is column 1, this is column 2, this is column 3. So in this, I want order amount, so I put 3. And this last piece, I'll show you in the different examples, but you can do exact match or approximate match. Most of the times you are going to use exact match, because if not, you'll get a result back that you won't expect. But I'll show you in the next example when you might want to use something like approximate match. But in this case, I'm going to use exact match. Start typing in a tab. Oops. Sorry. Scroll down in a tab, it'll take it. And if you don't put that last parameter, you don't put that last parameter in, see how this one has brackets around it? It will put a default in for you. In this case, the default is true. So again, like I said, most of the time you're using false, so you'll usually want to type that in. So now it looked up A102 in this group and came back with this. As I mentioned before, this was the column, so if I instead wanted salesperson, I could make that a 2, and it would bring back salesperson from there. Switch that back. It is doing exact match, as I mentioned. So if I came in here, I'll just retype this in. Array, column 3. So right now I have A1 of 1013 in here. That is not in this list. So you can either just be careful about what you put in here, but just to know if you put something like A102 but you had a space at the end, it still wouldn't find it because it's looking for literally an exact match. So one thing you can do instead, if you do know you're going to have a data set that you're going to have a lot of values in, you can also put what's called a data validation on this cell. And so I click in the cell and I go to the data tab at the top, which is something called data validation. There's several different ways in here, but where you can type in actual values that you want to always lock that to. But I'm just going to show you one that's like a list. And what I do is I say I want a list, and I want what's in that list to be what's from this first column. What should happen is this now becomes a drop-down field. So I could never type A13 in, 1013 in. It's just another way to make sure you're kind of locking values in. Next example is I'm going much slower than I thought it would be, is the approximate match. So in this one, what it's going to do is I'm going to look up the sales for Kramer and say what commission he gets. So when it's an approximate match, you need this data set to be ordered. So it needs to be sorted from lowest to highest, because what it's going to do is it's going to look for 1732, and it's going to go, oh, 1732 is greater than 1,000, right? Go to the next value. Oh, it's not greater than 2,000, so it's going to give back this 1%. So if I make 1,000 or more, I get 1%. If I make 2,000 or more, I get 2%. You just put that in. Look up this value in this array. I'm going to get back column 2, and then I want approximate matches. What I did wrong. Just left it in. Okay, so like I said, if I put in, if I made this 3,732, it's going to get up to this value, try to go to this one and say, nope, go back to this one, which is why I get 4% here. If my sales were higher, it's going to go and stop and basically say, oh, that's as high as it goes. One other thing to keep in mind, though, is if it's lower than this first amount, it's going to not get to that, so it's not going to have a value to give. And in this case, this result set where it's like a pound NA means not available. You can wrap this formula if you want to not show that ugly if NA. There's a formula called if NA, and then you can put a secondary formula in this first value, so it'll perform that function, and then it will perform this if NA function. So it'll look up here, and it will say if the VLOOKUP came back with an if NA, I can say I don't want you to show if NA. I want you to show no. So if I'm putting text, you need to put it in quotes, so that I can enter when it comes back with this. When it can't find anything, it's actually coming back with if NA, it shows no commission. But if I went back to higher comp, it would go back to doing the formula as expected. If you didn't want to use text, you could also just put it 0. Well, you could either do 0% as a text, right? Or if you wanted an actual number value, you don't need quotes for number values. So I'm gonna do this one piece because I want to talk about tables, and then I'll probably jump to pivot tables so that we can make sure we get through that. And if we don't have a lot of questions, I'm going to go back to some other examples. So this is the one we had done earlier, where it was just a VLOOKUP, this value. And I said I used a table array, which was just a selection, and then I wanted column 3, and exact match. If I'm using this kind of data set over and over again, and maybe next week someone comes in, buys something else, another salesperson, this one, and right. This is still only, go back and select this where I can see what selected. You can see that the red is only what I selected previously, so it's not taking those extra values. The best way to get around that, remove what I typed and remove my formula, is to change this into an actual what Excel considers a table or a dynamic table. So you can just click anywhere in that data set and use insert at the top and insert table. It's going to look at where you're clicking and basically grab as far as it can go until it hits some blank cells. So if I had like some weird formatting where some of these cells were blank, it might not get all the rows. So just make sure you have like a full populated table. And then in my case, I have headers. It's pretty good to have headers because it explains your data. So I say I have headers, and it's going to take those as known headers, and I hit some things that it does with tables is one, it will now give you where you can select values, select all, I can filter, and it's going to filter my table. But the other nice thing is if I now, actually one other thing, there's a table menu item up here. It's good to name your table. Right now it just defaults to table. I'm just going to call this sales person. We'll call it orders. So now whenever I want to reference things, I'm going to go back to my VLOOKUP table. In VLOOKUP, I can look this value up. And I can actually just start to type orders. That's what I called it. And I can use orders. And it highlights that. And then I still continue the rest of my formula with free and false. And the nice thing about this now is, see how it's got this little green caret here? When I can either click that. Oops. I just type in, it now adds this as another row. So now if I go up here and change this to, it's, what do you I even wanted it to be? And if I look at this formula, it is still selecting that whole table. So as I add more data in, it will just recognize that, and it will just increase the size of the table, so you don't have to go back and change your formulas over time. I'm going to jump to the tables. I've already made this one data set into a table, so as I just explained, I go to the tables, it's already here, it's already sales, that's why you've seen all this formatting as well. When you're using pivot tables, it's good to, just in general, it's good to start the data as a table because again, when you want to add more rows, it will just pull it in. There is a caveat to that, which when I finish my pivot table, I'll show you that in a second. But a pivot table is just going to be another way of summarizing this data. And it will give you ability to change columns and rows and what you're summarizing, whether that's sales or counts or some of the stuff we saw earlier. Easiest way to do it is you click into your table. Again, you go to insert and you insert it. And it realizes that I'm already in a table that's called sales. And it just asks me where do you want to put this. I'm going to put it on the same worksheet just so we can see the data together. Sometimes you will put it on a different worksheet just if you want to kind of keep separate information. So select existing worksheet, table range. I just need to click where I want it to start. So right now there's not here, it's no report here, but it's letting me, it's giving me parameters or places to build a report. And what it put up into this field names place, which is how you would build a report, is what it knew from my data table. So I've got date, I got sales rep, I got sales. I can click and drag this. If I drag it to rows, it puts just my sales reps into rows. So it's sitting down here. If I wanted it in columns, I can put it up here. Now see across. sales reps back down here. In this example, I'm going to create a report that shows monthly sales by sales rep. So total sales by rep by month. So now I've got sales reps. Now I need my months. I'm only going to get date, so I'm going to drag that, see what happens. And so it puts, for my sales reps, it puts months under it, but it also is putting days. My example, I don't want days, I just want all of January summed up. When it's got a date like this and you drag it in, it will actually give you both months and dates. I just want months, so I'm going to drag date, and I'm just, if you want to remove it from an area, you can just drag it off to the side and it will just go away. So unselected it up there, removed it up there. And now I've got by sales rep by month. But I still need my sales. So I'm going to take my sales and I'm going to drag it to this sum, that's what that's for, values. It's called sum, but you could actually, when I drag it here, if it's a number value, it will default to sums. But if I right click and do field settings, I actually have a lot of different options. So I can do counts, average, max, min, some creating standard deviation, stuff like that. Most of the time you're doing sums or counts or averages. We'll do sums for this example. And so now I've got my sales rep by month, their summary sales. There's a lot of different things you can do with formatting in here. One thing I like to do is, if you go to your Google design of this, this pivot table, there's some drop downs in here. So one thing is, right now it's got the subtotals on for each of my sales reps. Okay. And then it's also got a grand total. If I wanted to shut those off, I could shut those off. So I'm going to leave them. The other thing right now is kind of putting the month right under the sales rep. So that's called outline form. I can switch it to what's called tabular form and see how it moved them out to over here. It's a little easier to read. It also lets you put column headers across the data, so it's just a little easier to see. And then, as I mentioned before, right now it's using all my data to summarize these values, which is kind of quite a bit. But I also have some more that I'm going to add. And because this is a table, once I paste this in, it becomes part of the table. So it is there in the table, because now I've got April, May, June in there. But you'll see that this did not actually refresh. The reason being is when you build the pivot table, it builds a cache of that data and stores it. So you have to manually refresh it. So if I just go into the pivot table and go to the pivot table, I can also right click, but also in the menu bar, there's refresh. So if I refresh, now it pulls in that extra set of data. So that's just something to keep in mind if you are working with changing data sets. The next thing I want to do is just show a pivot table chart. So I'm going to start by building another table that's just monthly sales. So, and then I'm going to visualize that with a trend. So we'll do this. You'll see me create a pivot table again. So you'll see the same thing. And I'm going to click into this because it's going to know what table I'm already in, which will make it easier when building. With pivot table, so I selected my table, keep it in the existing. Just move this over so I can select it where I want to put it, and I'm going to put the table right here. Again, it pulls up this. Pulls up the field names. If you ever accidentally find that, if you hold, you can click and show field lists. Also, when you kind of click off the pivot table, it goes away, and you can click back in. So just know that if you lost it, you just right click. So I'm going to build this pivot table, and this one's just sales by month. So I don't care about the reps. So one thing to notice is that before I had to like separate it out months and days because it only had date in there. But since I've already done that in this table, it realizes that, and it gave me the nice, easy month value that I can slide down. And then I also want to just do total sales. So I'm going to do the same as I did before, slide sales to get sum of sales. And now I've got a quick month by sum of sales. As I mentioned before, tabular always looks a little bit better, so I'm just going to stop with that. That just gives me the column headers. So to do a chart or a graph or bar chart, any of those things, it's also on that insert menu, and you've got some different visualizations that you can pull from. There's a lot to go in here, but we're just going to do a simple line chart. So just a chart like this, we could make a fancier one if we wanted, but just stay simple today. So I'm going to select 2D line chart. It drops. Oops. It's better if you start in your data table because then it will build the chart for you. You can manually build it, but now if I do this, it takes what was in that table and does a best guess of what you want it to look like, some default values. So just shrink this down so it's a little better. So I can drag this over, I can slide it in. It is taking these values for these months and it is graphing them on here. As you build tables over time or charts over time, one, our visualization friends or even our UX friends will tell you is only include things that are actually adding value. So there's only one line here, and we already know it's going to be total sales. So you don't need this legend that goes with it. It's just extraneous. If you have something on here that you want to remove, you can just actually select it and hit delete. Undo that for a second. You can also use menus to do that. So up in the design area, there's chart elements. And so you'll see legend. Right now it's got that right legend. I'm going to switch it to none. It's going to go away. Similarly, while I can kind of mouse over to see the different data points, the actual values that's up here, it might be nice that my end user would be able to actually just see those data points easily. So I'm going to add the data labels in here, and I have a choice of where to put them above. Let's see how that looks. So in most cases, that's fine, but in a few, it's sort of running into the actual line. I can select the single one, oops, and just kind of drag it. This one will look better below. This one better below. And now that I have the actual data points, I don't need this extraneous data that I'm just going to try to guess what that value is. So I'm going to remove that that axis data values as well. Charts. Got a lot of helpful diagrams up here, so you can see that right now the horizontal's on. I'm going to remove that. So the side ones, and some people like grid lines. So now I have a nice chart with my values over time. one, kind of close on time. So one thing I'm just going to show that you can change the title by just typing in here. Another nice thing you can do is you can actually pull from different places. So I'm going to actually use this text here. So I'm selecting that, and I can select the formula bar at the top and do a formula that's just pulling this value. So I'm just pulling the K2 value, hit enter. That's going to go in here. And then if I go up here, I can, oh, actually, I think I need the dollar sign in my chart, just so people know. And it will just also pull it in here. All right, that was a lot.
That's awesome, Beth. I've learned a lot from this, and I've been doing spreadsheeting for a few months.
All right, so I'm going to pause here, see if there are questions or things I can answer.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a little bit of time for questions. If you did join during the presentation, there is a link in the chat to Slido. You can post your questions there. So the first one is Excel helpful for a business analyst career?
It's helpful in that you will probably use Excel at points in your career, because you will, like I said, there's fancier tools, and we'll get into that in some of these other tech talks we're doing. But sometimes building something in a fancier tool is just just takes too much time when you really just have something quick you want to look at. So these types of skills are more of that quick look at things. And then it's also useful when you maybe have to then share that file with someone else who might not be useful to that more advanced stuff. And I should just say that in some of these examples, there are other functions. So like we did VLOOKUP, which is vertical lookup. There are other ones called horizontal, and there's like a newer one called XLOOKUP that lets you do a lot more fancier stuff. But a lot of that is only in newer versions of Excel. And so you have to think about backwards compatibility, and you have to think about, like, if I'm sharing this file with somebody else, do they have the right version of Excel to use that formula? So I tend to use some of the older formulas just because of that, and so that you can make sure it's it's usable by everybody.
That's a really good point. Another question, which is arguably the most important question we've had, which is, are there any resources that you would recommend to learn more about Excel functions?
So the most easy probably is to YouTube.
Yeah.
Autumn and I were talking about this the other day. There are a lot of YouTube people out there who put lots of content out there, lots of free information. Depending on who you find, there's people who will not only give you like a talk through, but they'll also give you links to files that you can then download and do with them. Then there's, if you want just more passive, there's a Reddit subreddit called Excel, which just when you read through it, people will ask questions, people will answer. If you don't want to look at that every day, there's a weekly sort of bot post, but it's basically like the top 5 questions of the week and the top 5 responses of the week that you can just kind of look at and start to get used to what types of things people are trying to do. And my favorite is the TikTok guy. So there's this one guy, the one I follow right now is called, he's Big Excel Energy on TikTok. Less about some of this more particular stuff, but he does a lot of the visualizations. He's also just comical to listen to because one, he does his presentations with this like cat slinged in like a baby sling. And he talks in sort of like an AMSR sort of voice. He's like, now we're gonna make this look nice. He's just great to calmly watch Excel.
Darren had a question in the chat, which is, how long have you been working with Excel, and what words of encouragement would you give to beginners?
I've probably used it all of my career, which will age me, so almost 30-ish years. I think words of encouragement are, take your time. Like you'll forget to do where I was doing that at 4 and locking cells. And so take your time, and if something doesn't look right, go back to the formula, look again, right? You saw I got all frustrated in the beginning when I was picking the wrong order of things. So use the tool tips, use the help. There are times when, like I said, you can do what my husband does with the calculator, but just start using it more and more. even if it's something that you maybe for a presentation or maybe for something big, but the more you use it, the more you'll get used to some of how the functions work.
Yeah, Jason had a great comment in the chat. He said, like everything, practice, and I'll plus one that. Find excuses to use Excel more and push through frustrations because it won't get easier unless you invest the time to get better. I definitely can speak to that. I've been budgeting, even though they're budgeting apps, I've still budget using Excel. I just find it infinitely better than every app out there. Yeah. Super useful. And my budget sheet has evolved so many times. It's almost like a little passing hobby. And then for anyone who is curious, Microsoft has their Excel docs, which is like if you're ever trying to learn something, go find the docs, and there's a reference here. You can look up every single function. They have examples and things like that as well. And then obviously you can use that breadcrumb to go find something on YouTube. So there are a lot of ways. Just the most important thing is probably don't give up, right?
Yes, keep trying.
Okay. Let's see. Any other questions from anyone? If you do have a question and you have not figured out how to use Slido, you can enter it in the chat, or you can just use the raise hand feature, or just come on video. We got a couple minutes left.
So I just want to offer up. One of the additional values of the Tech House is you have a lot of folks in this community who, one, don't have a computer at home, two, don't have Excel, and then three, don't have an instructor like a Beth, who can kind of give them like the structured lesson and then be around to answer questions. But one of my favorite writers is Malcolm Gladwell. He said, if you do something for 10,000 hours, you become an expert at it, right? And so the more you use it, you'll hit that wall or you'll be anxious, but you'll be in an environment. The wonderful thing about tech is that my experience that people like to help each other, right? So people don't hoard knowledge, information, they like to share it. And it has so many practical uses, whether or not you're doing a family budget, or you belong to, your church or your synagogue, and your goal is to like keep account of money for a project and then use Excel. But I literally, Beth, when you're going over Count If, I've got my like friendly little laptop here. It's just like, I was like youtube.com, Count If. And the wonderful thing is, if you have two monitors, then we have the capability for people when to comment, like you start the YouTube video, and then you open up Excel, and you literally like follow what's going on. And if you miss something, the great thing about a YouTube video, you can rewind it to the point where you need to go over it. But this is just like invaluable information. And now I'm excited to just take a deeper dive into sum if and count if. And when I become an expert, I'm going to get a sum if shirt and a count if shirt. So that's great. So thank you, Beth.
Okay, great. I think there are no other questions. We can wrap things up. I just really wanted to say thank you to Beth Oh, thank you very much for the reminder. Yes, we have a survey that we put together, which I had copied, but then I shared the link to the Microsoft docs. But the survey, just a moment. If you go to this link, there's a survey that only has a few questions, and it will help us out a lot because Doug and I are working with Darren, Tech House, to bring more of these presentations from folks at Audible on different tech topics, but we don't really know necessarily what you want to learn about.
Do I need a code for this one?
You should not need a code for this one, but if you do, it would be 2023, which I shared in the chat. And yes, if you fill out the survey, it would really help us get the information that we need to, better serve you. We want to make sure that we're bringing you topics that are going to actually be helpful. We have a couple of other events lined up for the start of next year, so we will be back. If you're, Darren, I'm sure has like mailing lists and things through Tech House. There's the Tech House website, the events page, which will have the most current event schedules, so you can check back there. And Doug, anything else you wanted to share?
Yeah, just wanted to echo those same points. Thank you again, Beth. This was really great. And if anyone wants to rewatch or relearn any of this, we'll make sure to post it up on the site so that people can view the recording. And thank you to Autumn and to Darren as well. Really appreciate the opportunity to get to share this stuff. And I really hope that people fill out the Slido so that we get some
Yes.
great ideas on what to do next.
So Autumn and Doug, just one quick question with 2 minutes left. That survey for people who are not viewing now, would you be able to make the link to the survey available to me so that
I
I
will
can send it to the list, and then you have a broader audience of people that will share what they're interested in learning about?
That's a
Sounds
great
good.
idea. Thank you so much, Darren. Yeah, I'll send it to you via email.
Super. And
Awesome.
thank you, Ms. Mohammed.
Okay, well, thank you so much. This was such a pleasure to put together, and I know Doug and I are looking forward to more of the same. So thank you everyone for joining.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks to my
everyone.
Audible family. Thank you so much.
It's good.